Hey folks, it's Dave Chung from Compass here. I hope you're doing well. I recently had the chance to sit down and talk with Ryan Skaggs from Neighborhood Loans. Now, Ryan is a local lender here on the North Shore whom I've worked with many times. And as we head into this year's spring market, I wanted to ask Ryan if he had any tips for buyers from a lender's perspective. So let's jump right into that conversation with Ryan. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Honored to be here. Thank you so much, Dave.
Absolutely. Well, as we head into the spring market here in 2022, I get the sense, and I think a lot of others agree, that it's going to be very competitive for buyers, much like it was in 2021. So whenever I'm submitting an offer for a buyer, I'm always trying to do whatever I can to have that offer stand out from the crowd. And you talked to me earlier about how you also have 3 tips for buyers in terms of what they can do to stand out and hopefully get their offer accepted. Let's dig right in. What's the first tip that you have for us?
Yeah, for sure. It's around the pre-approval and getting the strongest pre-approval possible. So to kind of break down that foundationally is there's 3 different levels, at least in my opinion or my vocabulary that I look at. And that is 1, a pre-qualification. That is basically an application with a credit pull, no documentation, very weak, in terms of an actual pre-approval or what skin in the game you've done or anything like that from a buyer's perspective or from a seller's perspective if they're looking at the letter. If it's just a pre-qualification, really haven't taken that next level. Then the pre-approval, that's kind of par for the course. You provided basic documentation, had a conversation with the lender. A lot of times in a balanced market, that's about as enough as you need to do, to be competitive. But as we both know, in this kind of highly competitive market, what can you do to take the next step? And, the kind of vocabulary word that I would use is a pre-commitment. Now, we call that the Neighborhood Loans Fast Lane Approval. And basically what that means is we are getting the file pre-underwritten prior to the client finding the property. So if you were the client, Dave, we would get, W-2s, pay stubs, some asset statements, some bank statements, things like that. We would get enough to make an underwriting approval, actually sending it to a physical underwriter, to my underwriter, Tom, and sending it to Tom and saying, Tom, underwrite this file even though they don't have a property. And then thus we can give a pre-commitment or a conditional approval to lend. And that is going to be far and above someone that just went to a 1-800 number or just typed in some information and got a quick pre-approval letter. So, standing above in a competitive market, taking that next step to what we would call, again, our fast lane approval, but taking that next step to actually getting fully underwritten prior to finding the home, things that would be left after would be title, insurance, basic clerical items, appraisal, that come with it. But you could probably close in 2 weeks after that. It's dependent upon the complexity. So getting to that higher level in that pre-approval stage is definitely tip 1.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. So basically that pre-commitment, really all you have to do is just plug in the property after that and you're almost
There's
done.
obviously some items that go with the property, as I said, the title and the appraisal and some things like that, that's going to tie into it. But if you've got the whole credit file, the whole credit approval done, now we know you can afford a mortgage of X amount, and we just insert a property that fits. But if I'm a seller and I'm looking at it going, wow, there's not really much, from here to be worried about, and I think if I was looking at that like kind of a pre-commitment letter, that would assuage my concerns as a seller and definitely put that offer at the top of the list. So
Awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. The second tip that we wanted to touch base on was really, when I'm working with a seller and I'm on the receiving end of a lot of offers, I'm always looking at those letters coming in from lenders, the pre-approvals or perhaps even a pre-commitment letter, seeing who the lender is, and a lot of times reaching out to the lender to find out what they've done to pre-qualify or pre-approve that client to really just gain that level of comfort for that buyer. What are some of the things that you do as a lender on the other side? If you're getting a call from me or you're reaching out to the listing agent, what are some things that you can do as a lender to really, help support your buyer in that process?
Yeah, great question. So, I'll say this, I'll start with this, I should say, is that, not all lenders are created equal. So if you've got 5 letters all at the same price, as In your experience, like, they're not treated equal. If you've just got a 1-800 number from an out-of-state lender that doesn't know the local market, that doesn't have local appraisal ties and things like that, that matters. So I think clients need, not only low rates, good terms, things like that, but someone local to be able to kind of put it all together. But to your point of like how to get that offer accepted, or or what the lender does to help with that, I think that's a key question buyers need to be asking their lender, is saying, I can get a pre-approval anywhere. How are you going to help me actually get the property? So what we do in our process, and it really is a process, because one of my 3 core values is process driven, and we follow it. So therefore, list agents and buyers agents and clients can, depend upon it, because we do it the same way every time. And during that pre-approval process, we will update the pre-approval letter or the pre-commitment letter, whatever it is, to the exact address of what they're offering with the exact purchase price. Therefore, we're not showing our hand. If it's if they're going to offer $700,000 and they just have a general pre-approval letter for $800,000, to me, that's, showing a couple cards in your hand, that they can do more. So, putting the address, putting the exact offer price of what it's going in at is one. Then 2, reaching out to the list agent and communicating with them, hey, got a great client. We've got a ton of documentation on file. I've already vetted all the income. I've vetted the credit. Obviously, as a lender, we cannot provide customer sensitive information, but we can provide enough color, to someone like you as a list agent to say, absolutely super clean deal, great credit, exceptional down payment. I mean, this is a very vanilla loan. We'll be able to move fairly quickly. Typically, when I talk with a list agent too, I'll also mention what my average application to clear to close, the timeline. So like, I follow that literally daily on a report that I look at every morning on my dashboard and say, where is my application to clear to close? And, I'm going to finish the year out at 25 days, which was my goal. I wanted to get underneath it. I got at it. But from application to clear to close on any file. So if I can say, hey, you've got a 40-day close and my average is 25 days, you should feel really comfortable that we're going to knock this out of the park, and there's not going to be any extensions or any issues or things like that come up. And then the last thing that we do is we provide a letter to the list agent just about us and our team, right? Because I think one of the pieces is that knowing, as I kind of mentioned before, knowing that, someone local, like I live in the North Shore, I work in the North Shore, I have appraisal connections here, my team is here. Everyone on my team is an actual, I know their first name and they work beside me each day. Well, maybe in a non-COVID environment, they'd work beside me, but they're local, right? And having that ability, so I outline that in a letter just to kind of give the, give the list agent or the seller kind of an understanding of who's doing the financing. Because I think that is just as important as, who's the buyer and what's the buyer profile coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared a lot of that, because I think those are some of the things that most folks don't understand are happening behind the scenes, or should be happening behind the scenes to really...
Should be. That's a great point.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why I keep pushing buyers all the time. Say, ask your lender, how are they going to help you acquire the home? Like, yes, it is absolutely my job to help you get a pre-approval, right? Yes, it's absolutely my job to help you get a loan. But if they don't have that third piece of how are you going to help me get my offer accepted, you could just be spinning your wheels for forever. I've had clients that have gone, and I know of an exact example. I won't use the company name, but it was like a 1-800 number, and they had made 5 offers, and they kept getting, no. And I can't tell you where they were at in terms of if they were first, second, third, or whatever. But, she got introduced to me because the buyer's agent was like, hey, we've tried this enough times. Would you please speak to Ryan and his team? He's had a pretty high success rate with his buyers getting, clients into homes quickly. And she's like, so what are you going to do different? And I was like, everything, absolutely everything different than just giving you a letter and saying, best of luck, let me know when you get a contract. And, I think clients just don't think about that piece, being a part of that process. So.
Now, one topic that has become a very hot topic the last 18 months or so is with regards to appraisals. And, we're seeing lots of offers being written over the asking price and sometimes well over the asking price. And houses are obviously selling over list price sometimes. But for a seller, a lot of times when a seller receives an offer that's over the asking price, of course they might be happy about the number, but their biggest concern sometimes might be the fact that, well, what if the house doesn't appraise for that number? What if it appraises below it? And essentially there's this gap between the appraised value and the purchase price. Now, historically, there's been all sorts of different options to, how to address that. The purchase price might get reduced and whatnot, but in this environment where sellers have a lot of the power or all the power, most of the power, that doesn't happen very often. So how would you recommend to buyers, and what can be done to help put a seller at ease when it comes to a possible or potential appraisal gap?
Yeah, so I would say twofold. So one of which, how you're making that offer and the lender communicating with the buyer's agent of saying, an appraisal gap strategy of putting some sort of addendum together or something in the contract, and then making sure that the buyer, the agent, the lender, we're all on the same page of kind of what that means, how that works. And essentially, in a just kind of 30,000 foot view, and we can get into the granular detail on another one for sure. But, looking at it, like say it's $1 million that you're offering, but, it was only a purchase price of $950 or something, like, hey, we'll still move forward if it appraises for $975. We'll still move forward if it appraises for at least $950 or more, or whatever. You put those sorts of statements in there saying, hey, we will still move forward even if it doesn't appraise at that purchase price. For all lenders, we're going to lend the lesser of the purchase price or appraised value. So we're going to look at our numbers based upon that. But by creating some of that verbiage or that language in the offer or in an addendum or something like that, that's where you can really assuage the concerns of the seller to say, hey, these guys want to move forward and they understand it might not appraise because we're in an appreciating market. And they get it, and therefore, wow, what a strong offer. The second piece of that is understanding not just how to get the offer accepted, but what it actually means in your financing. What do the numbers look like? What options do you have? How does it look? Do you have any consequence to, potentially, a monetary consequence of like, hey, do I need to put a little bit more down payment in? Yeah, I'm okay to do that. Well, what if you're not? Right? Then what does that mean? And understanding what those numbers are. Because I feel like as a lender, I need to help clients make informed decisions. Not make the decisions for them, but be proactive in the approach to say, hey, if this does happen, here's our plan B. Is this, does this work for you? If not, we've got plan C or, whatever it may be, but give them the kind of nuts and bolts of how that might look from a numbers perspective, but also give them the kind of knowledge and understanding of what it means to actually get it in that offer, right? Because if you leave that blank, and as you know, you get it in there, I mean, a seller looks at it and is like, oh, I like that number, absolutely. But then the reality check comes in. And then that piece of, well, what if it doesn't appraise and then the deal falls apart and we have to go back on the market and we lose, some of the momentum that we had? I mean, I'm sure you can speak more to that than I can, but that's a real thing. So,
well, thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate the tips. It's been fantastic talking to you. I know that it's going to be a busy spring market coming here, and if any viewers were interested in learning more, getting in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, thank you. So just an email to me probably is the easiest, ryan@neighborhoodloans.com, or you could find me on my YouTube channel if you want to look up some other videos or things that I've done. I put out weekly videos on content on mortgage related on YouTube, and that's just youtube.com/Ryan Skaggs. So if you want to give me a call or a text anytime, 773-569-8692, and I love having conversations about real estate, so it's never too early. I say that all the time. It's never too early. If you want to buy in a year or 10 years or whatever else, I'll love the chat and be honored for the opportunity. So,
awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
So that was my recent conversation with Ryan Skaggs from Neighborhood Loans. I'm Dave Chung from Compass. If you have any questions or if I can help in any way, feel free to reach out, and I hope to see you soon.